Hey, class! We are discussing Florence Nightingale now. Yes, Florence Nightingale. You may have heard of her. She is the founder of modern nursing, I guess, is what we would say. She very much revolutionized the nursing world. And the work of hers that we will be reading and discussing is an excerpt from her larger work called Cassandra. Very interesting title, and we will be discussing the significance of that title too. Yeah, so let's think about that a little. If you look at the written out lecture, we have a picture, yes, another photograph of Florence Nightingale. So again, really neat to see what she actually looked like and to see how she dressed and just, I don't know, I find it neat to be able to picture some of these women that we're reading about. I feel as if I'm like more personally connecting with them when I have an actual picture of them in my head. I know that might seem silly, but it works for me. So anyway, I included a photo. I hope you enjoy it. Also, make sure you see the web links that I've included. You can check them out, read them however you like. You don't have to read all the words that are there, but if you want to learn more information, I've included victorianweb.org, which has more biographical and literary information on Florence Nightingale. And there is an NPR actually, this is pretty neat. It's this NPR piece has one of the very few recordings of Florence Nightingale speaking on it. Yeah, so you could not only can you see her in the photo, but if you click on this NPR link, you can actually hear her voice and what she sounded like. So, hey, first woman we've been able to do that with in all of our writers that we've read. So you can see how we are approaching modern times, that we actually have a recording of Florence Nightingale speaking. It's really neat to be able to hear the voice too. So like talk about bringing something to life, right? That really helps. And then there's a YouTube clip that contains an overview of Florence Nightingale's life and work. If you'd like to know more about that, check it out. All right, Florence Nightingale is British. All right, so that means she lived in England. She was born in 1820. Born to a wealthy family while they were staying in Florence, Italy. So she actually wasn't born in England. They were staying in Florence, Italy. So that's why she's named Florence. She's named after the city of her birth, Florence, Italy, which is that famous Renaissance city. But anyway, her family's British, and she lived in England, but she was born in Florence. Hence her name. Likewise, her sister Parthenope was named after the classical name of Naples, Italy. So that was known classically as Parthenope. And so that's where she got her name from too. So yeah, their parents did a little creative naming there. Florence was well educated, believe it or not. She came from a wealthy family, so that was more doable for the wealthier families to educate their female children. But she was also schooled to lead the privileged life of an aristocratic British female, which meant she would spend her life in leisure rather than in action. In 1837, she was about 17 years old then, she experienced what she identifies as 4 callings from God for her to enter a life of action and service to humanity. Between 1851 and 1852, Florence wrote the work of hers from which we take an excerpt this week, Cassandra, where she rejects the over-feminization of women by the Victorian culture that she felt her mother and her sister reprehensibly epitomized. That is, the inactive, leisuring angel in the house, of that Charles Patmore poem that we talked about, in our overview of the literature of the 19th century. That angel in the house concept where women were the angels, the innocent, they needed to be protected. They just, they lie on a couch and spend their days in leisure because they cannot work hard. They cannot be too pushed. It's that I am a flower and need to be protected and viewed and coddled. That version of women, she rejected that, and she felt as if it was her calling to to write against that and to work for humanity and to have a life of action rather than a life of inactivity. Florence articulates her disgust with her mother and sister's life of luxury and inaction, despite their education and privilege. She says, here we are so privileged and we have such an education, and yet you spend it frittering away your time in inactivity. We of all people should use our education and privilege for the good of humanity, because we are blessed with that. There, but for the grace of God go I could have been born into life with much less advantage and many fewer resources, but I wasn't. I was born with a life of education, of privilege, of money, of resources, and so I need to use them to help humanity. I need to be the hands of God here on earth. She felt very called to that by God. So she committed herself to a life of social service. But she feared that her contributions would be as ineffective as were Cassandra's prophecies, which, as you may recall from Greek myth and the Trojan War, were always accurate but never believed by Cassandra's family and by her nation of Troy. Cassandra preached, for example, that she prophesied that the Trojan horse, if the Trojans took it in from the Greeks, that they would be destroyed by it. But nobody believed her. She was cursed by Apollo to have prophetic visions and that she would be able to foretell the future, but that no one would believe her. Yeah, and that's the fate that Cassandra suffered. And very much Florence Nightingale felt that that was the lot of women, that they could see the truth, but they would not be believed because they were women. People wouldn't believe that women could know something more than a man could, and so people would disregard what they were saying. And so she called her work Cassandra because she felt as if she spoke the truth to humanity, but she feared that humanity would reject it because she was a woman. In 1852, Florence attended nursing school. She then cared for patients at hospitals in England and advocated for the poor. So it's pretty neat. She was able to attend a school to study nursing in the 19th century, the 1800s, where women weren't allowed to attend very many schools at all. Yet she could attend nursing school and study nursing to become a nurse. After that, she went to the Crimea when the British were at war with Russia. She was a brilliant math student and statistician. So in other words, she could record statistics. And the polar diagram that she invented a polar diagram. It was like a really advanced mathematical geometric concept, that you typically don't study till you get to like algebra 2 or modern analysis in math. She invented a polar diagram, and it allowed her to identify different conditions that contributed to the health and survival of patients that she worked with as a nurse. And the things that she noticed contributed to their survival rate were sanitation, medicine, and care, etc. She implemented these principles in the Crimea, where her profession as a nurse was viewed almost on the same level as that of the prostitutes who followed the army around. So maybe that's why they let her go to nursing school, because people didn't esteem nurses very highly. So, I guess it was deemed, oh, okay, you want to be a nurse? You're a woman? Whatever. We don't deem that much higher than a prostitute. So she was allowed to go to school to study nursing, and she was allowed to go to the Crimea to practice it because it wasn't esteemed very highly. Notwithstanding, Florence's practices led to a drastic improvement in the survival rate of sick and wounded British soldiers. Hence, she invented modern nursing because she realized how important sanitation, so sanitary conditions, were to the survival rate of patients. And she noticed that if you cared for patients, if you clean them and wash them and you gave them medicine and you tended to them, and you kept track of their symptoms and followed their progress, these patients tended to survive more than those who weren't cared for in that fashion. And she backed it up with statistics and polar diagrams. That gift she had with math, that ability, that skill that she had, she put it to work. Remember, she believed she had God-given talents and she wanted to use them to serve humanity, and serve humanity she did. Because of her successes in the Crimea, Florence returned to England as a national heroine, or a national hero, known as the Lady of the Lamp. That's her famous nickname. She took ill, however, and became an invalid. Some speculate that this illness was devised by her, or perhaps was even psychosomatic, to enable her to escape the society of her mother and sister. As an invalid, Florence had extensive time, the proverbial room of her own, and family money. Remember that Virginia Woolf so wrote about, that a woman needed to be able to write. So she wrote hundreds of treatises on nursing and the care of the poor. She instituted her own school for nursing and revolutionized medical care to the point where she greatly reversed the previous trend of hospital patients actually being more likely to die than people left untreated. So at that time, if you went to the hospital, you were more likely to die than the people who were left untreated, because the care was so bad and the understanding of how to care for patients was so bad. So she revolutionized care for patients. She started her own school for nursing, and she wrote hundreds of treatises on nursing and the care for the poor. So even though she became an invalid, quote unquote, it gave her the time to write these things and to start this school and to revolutionize the care for the needy, for the poor, and for patients who were needing medical care. So enjoy reading about the life of Florence Nightingale, this Lady of the Lamp, who would hold the lamp and look for patients to cure. And the work of hers that we read for class, the excerpt from Cassandra, that prophetess who knew the truth but wasn't often followed. But she did invent modern nursing, so she was followed, and we have her to thank for that. Enjoy these readings and writings.